Having just endured what opposition leader Tony Abbott refers to as the longest federal election campaign of all time, Victorians are about to go to the polls again for their state election next month. Buoyed by the Greens' victory in Melbourne of their first seat in the House of Representatives at a general election, the Greens are now pulling out all stops to try to win seats in the Victorian Lower House. They already hold the balance of power in the upper house. 2 Labor ministers are at risk, and the Greens regard their campaign as a test case for other state elections in New South Wales next March and then Queensland. Political editor Heather Hewitt reports.
Flushed with the success of getting their first member into the House of Representatives at a general federal election, the Greens are now on a nationwide hunt for seats in state lower houses. And Victoria is first cab off the rank. The Greens' best-known figures gathered in the heart of Melbourne this week to kick off the campaign to wrest seats from Labor at the state election next month.
We are on the move. We are in this to give people who've been disenfranchised for decades power in the parliaments.
Right here in the federal seat of Melbourne, can you please welcome to the stage Adam Banks, the federal member for Melbourne.
It's got to start somewhere, and it's going to start at this election in places like Melbourne.
We've shown already what we can do with grassroots democracy by making history and getting Adam elected just 7 weeks ago. Now we need a voice, and voices in the state lower house.
Should we send that guy to state parliament?
The Greens have 4 inner-city seats in their sights, including those held by 2 government ministers. But they think they have their best chance with this barrister and a founder of the party, Brian Walters SC, who's running in the same territory where the Greens did so well federally.
Our job is not to display state ministers as such. It's simply to give the voters better candidates.
Do you think the Greens have a reasonable chance at this election?
Well, in the inner city, there's no doubt Labor's vote has collapsed. In fact, Labor's votes collapsed in many parts of Victoria. So the Greens are obviously in looking for votes, but we're looking for votes as well.
Do you feel that you are at grave risk now of losing your seat to the Greens?
Well, obviously what happened in the federal election was, for many people, a signpost for the future, but the Victorian Greens are a very different group of people.
It's this long-serving minister in the seat of Melbourne, Bronwyn Pike, who's fighting for her political life.
We're constantly building things, aren't we?
They're building.
Along with the Housing Minister, Richard Wynne, in the seat adjoining hers.
Richard, tram right at your door.
They're suddenly out and about a lot more than usual to promote projects like affordable housing in the city. Bronwyn Pike came close to losing her seat to the Greens at the last election. This time, the Greens are quietly confident they can pull it off.
The pollsters tell us that it will be 1 or possibly 2, but I know from long experience we've been told that before, and we have a big job in front of us. Because the big parties, when they see the Greens coming, will throw a huge effort and a lot of money into preventing the Greens being elected into the parliament.
How are you?
But no amount of money looks likely to save Bronwyn Pike at the next election, according to senior Labor figures who say she'll struggle to stem the Greens' momentum that's intensified since the federal election.
They are obviously energised because of the win in Melbourne, but there's a long way to go, and I think people will be watching very closely and looking at how they negotiate these preference deals.
The Greens candidates have been out campaigning for months, and it's the major parties that are now playing catch-up. Central to any chance of survival for the 2 ministers at risk is whether the Liberals give their first preferences to the Greens. And State Opposition Leader Ted Baillieu faces a battle in coalition ranks about that.
There'll always be different views about these things, but certainly the Labor Party are banging the drum. John Brumby's banging the drum, urging other parties not to give their preferences to the Greens.
This is a dilemma for Ted Baillieu. A number of senior Liberals have told me they feel very uncomfortable with the thought that Liberal votes will get a Green up in Melbourne.
The Victorian election is seen very much as a test case by the Greens and the major parties as to whether there's a growing groundswell of support for the Greens at the state level.
Greens getting into the House of Government here in Victoria is going to inspire voters in the other mainland states.
If that's the case, the Greens will be looking next to the New South Wales state election in March, and after that, Queensland.
Whether the Greens pick up seats here in the Victorian Lower House or not, internal ALP polling at this stage shows Labor pulling off a decisive victory overall. That's, of course, what matters most to party leaders and power brokers, who also see this as providing moral authority to shift the party's national power base from the New South Wales right to Victoria. That move has been on ever since the federal election campaign, steered by New South Wales Labor, and widely regarded in ALP ranks as a disaster.
I think what we've seen over the last 11 years is very strong leadership from Victoria in the major policy debates that have really shaped the future of our country.
Do you think the New South Wales right then has perhaps had its day when it comes to a power base in running federal election campaigns?
Well, you would have to question, I guess, the effectiveness of some of the strategies that they've been overseeing, given the nature and state of New South Wales politics at this point in time.
Victoria is just starting to focus on the state election to be held on the last Saturday of November. And you can bet there'll be plenty of party heavyweights from all sides heading its way soon to try to shore up support, one way or the other.
Political editor Heather Hewitt.